Welcome to this week's episode of Sussex Sport Weekly Podcast. I'm Matt Poll, and this week I'm joined by Brighton and Hove Albion writers Darren Howard and Frankie Elliott, as well as the Football in Question podcast, Ashley Adamson-Edwards, who will discuss all things Crawley Town. There was drama on and off the field in Brighton's game at Tottenham Hotspur on Saturday. Albion were beaten 2-1 at Spurs, but the Seagulls saw 2 goals disallowed for handball, a very strong penalty appeal turned down, and manager Roberto De Zerbi sent off. We will discuss all the fallout from the game at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and look ahead to this Saturday's trip to Chelsea. Meanwhile, Crawley Town slipped back into the bottom 2 after a disappointing Easter bank holiday weekend. The Reds drew with Bradford on Good Friday before going down 4-0 at Barrow on Easter Monday. A good set of results for relegation rivals Hartlepool saw the North East club leapfrog crawling the table and plunged Scott Lindsay's side back into the relegation mire with 5 League 2 games to go. We will reflect on a tough week for Crawley and look ahead to this week's pair of massive games against Tranmere Rovers and fellow relegation rivals Colchester United. But first, we will start with Brighton and Hove Albion. Darren, where does one begin after the result at Spurs? The defeat in North London leave the Seagulls 7 points behind 5th place Spurs, albeit with 2 games in hand. But the manner of the defeat must surely leave a sour taste in the mouth of the players and the supporters.
Yeah, I was at the match on Saturday, and everyone was just speaking to the players and the manager afterwards. Everybody was just really deflated, and it does leave a sour taste because of the manner it happened, and I think it was sting for quite some time because it pretty much ended their top 4, their hopes of finishing in the top 4. And other than Son's goal, Brighton played very well, and they should have been the ones celebrating the 3 points. And for the rest of the season, they should still really be competing for the Champions League spots. But that was, as you mentioned, with some terrible decisions, that sort of opportunity's been taken away from them, really. And each decision was harsh, really, to say the least. You can go through them all. With Mitoma's disallowed goal, it's a lovely finish, by the way, and it hit him sort of above the shirt line with his first touch. It was a McAllister through ball, and then so that was the first one. And then Danny Welbeck's shot in the second half. He actually played very well. He came in for Evan Ferguson, and he was dropping deep many of the kind, and that's how that move actually came from. He dropped deep, ran at the defence, and his shot came off McAllister, and it looked like it came off his hip. And not his hand. And I've seen sort of pretty much, most of the replays, and I haven't seen a camera angle that shows it came off his arm as yet. So to say that was a clear and obvious error from VAR to intervene with that seemed very harsh as well. Then we had the Mitoma's penalty, the one that Brighton received an apology for. Firstly, how the on-field referee, it was how he missed it. It's unclear. Where the press box was, we were stationed quite close to it, and you could actually see the referee was in front of the action, and pretty much the whole of that side of the stadium could see that he was clipped at that point. There was no need for him to go down, and it was just baffling that the referee didn't give the penalty, and then VAR didn't intervene for a clear and obvious one. So that's. Yeah, so that was odd, to say the least. And then we had the one on Dunk as well, as his shirt was pulled. That was perhaps the most sort of debatable one, but in my view, probably sort of looking at it, it still should have been given as a penalty. But so it was really tough. And if perhaps just one of those calls that have gone against Brighton, you had said they were hard done by, but the fact they were denied all 4, makes it particularly galling for all concerned. And it was a shambles, really, and a costly one for Brighton. And they're also charged yesterday by the FA after the managers were sent off. So yeah, really, really bad day. And there's no love lost either, by the way, between the 2 managers. I don't know if you saw, but De Zerbi had a real go at Stellini before the match, and he was still fuming in the post-match conference. The result didn't help, but he was still, really, he wasn't in any mood to apologise to Stellini. But apparently all had to do with comments that Stellini said about De Zerbi to some of the reporters off the record in his pre-match presser. he was supposedly talking about what De Zerbi was like when he was a player, and those comments sort of got back to De Zerbi, who was less than impressed. So, but yeah, it was a side issue on the day, but it was clearly set the tone for a fiery match, and one, that didn't go Albion's way because of some dreadful decisions, really.
Well, as Darren's mentioned there, Frankie, the refereeing body, the PGMOL, have admitted that Brighton should have been awarded a penalty for Pierre-Emile Højbjerg's tackle on Mitoma and subsequently apologised. It's all very well and good them saying sorry, but it will mean little to Brighton and their supporters. I will assume, Frankie, they're not going to get anything back from it. Are they just empty words?
Well, it won't mean anything. I mean, if anything, it's salt in the wound. I think, if you look at the idea of an apology is that you obviously you're saying sorry for what's happened and you won't do it again. Brighton have received 3 apologies in the last 4 months. That doesn't really sound like they've learned anything from those mistakes. Look, you don't want to be too much of a skeptic towards it, but you have to look at the apologies. Obviously, the original one for the Liverpool FA Cup tie, Brighton did win that game. For the Fabinho, what should have been a red card. So you won't read too much into that. Obviously, that was still a poor decision. But you look at the Premier League ones, you say the Mitoma penalty and the Estupiñán goal that should have been counted for against Crystal Palace. And then you look at all the other decisions and you see, well, at the start of the season, obviously they won the game against Manchester United. There was a clear penalty in that first game of the season they should have got, and Martinez on Danny Welbeck. Also, later on this season, with games they haven't won, away at Leicester, they drew 2-2. Danny Welbeck should have had a penalty in that game. There was also some in the Aston Villa defeat before Christmas. Luca Digne has gone straight through Solly March when he's trying to clear the ball. They've gone on to lose that game 2-1. Another clear penalty that should have been given. And you do feel that the reason that Brighton are just given apologies is they are a smaller club. I know Arsenal received an apology earlier this season as well, but I haven't seen any of the other big clubs above Brighton in the league, which are all bigger clubs and top 6 clubs. I haven't seen them receive any apologies or have as poor refereeing decisions as the one we've seen. So it feels to me that the apologies are given to Brighton because this is a dream for them to achieve Champions League football or European football. The rest of the clubs, it's a vital thing. These decisions cost the clubs much more than it does Brighton. That's not obviously good enough, but it does. That's the only thing I can come to, because we're talking about consistently poor decision making. And then if you look at it from a points perspective, I know goals change games and you can't just add them on and say that they win the game from there. But let's say Estupiñán goals count against Crystal Palace, they win that game. That's an extra 2 points. We look at the Brighton-Tottenham game, that was 1-1 when Danny Welbeck scored. It was also 1-1 when Mitoma should have got the penalty, which is the decision they offered the apology for. Let's say Kane doesn't score, or even if they say that he does score, we're looking at a situation where if they draw that game, they're 6 points behind Manchester United. If they win that game, they are 4 points behind Manchester United. That is a huge difference from where they are. They are 10 points behind with 10 games to go. And that is, as Darren said, it's almost over in terms of reaching Champions League football. It's made it very hard to get Europa League football, and even Conference League is going to be a struggle. If you go 6 points behind or 4 points behind, it's a lot better. You feel in a lot stronger position, especially playing Manchester United in the running and Newcastle United. It's, if Brighton don't make European football, there'll be a number of factors that are of their own volition for why I didn't get there. But unfortunately, refereeing decisions is one of the factors, because it has costed them games and it's cost them points. And it's a really, really sad thing to have to talk about this as a factor of Brighton's season, but you can't ignore it, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, Darren, as Frankie said there, that it's hard to ignore the impact that VAR has had on Brighton's season. Post-match against Tottenham, Lewis Dunk said he didn't understand what VAR was here for, while BBC pundit Chris Sutton said Albion were robbed. I guess the £1 million question is, in answer to Lewis Dunk's question, what is VAR for if it's not going to get decisions like that correct?
But yeah, these are the type of games that VAR were introduced for, to reduce the mistakes made by on-field referees in the biggest games that matter the most to fans, to the players, the clubs financially as well. This was huge for their chances of Champions League football. And, let's not, a season in the Champions League can massively change, the future of a club at Brighton's current level that they're at now in terms of the money it brings in, in terms of the profile it brings on a club, the players they could potentially sign, and perhaps more importantly this summer, in terms of the players they could keep as well. You look at Caicedo and McAllister. If you can offer them Champions League football, they've got a good chance of keeping those players. But it's a difficult. Europe's still a possibility, but that game at Tottenham pretty much dashed their hopes, and it is painful. And the club have been building towards matches like this, the ones that really matter in the business end of the season against the top sides. Inside, a stadium like that, Tottenham, it was an atmosphere, and it was, it was a huge day for the fans, and the thing is, the players actually, they delivered on the pitch as well. They produced the performance they need to. They played better than Tottenham. They created better chances, but were denied by a system that was put in place to do the exact opposite of what it did. It's as I said, it was not just one decision, but all the decisions went against them on the day, and it's really cost them. And you can see why Dunk was so baffled. And the one thing about the interview with Dunk that surprised me was that he managed to stay so measured. Really, it was just moments after the match. His blood must have been boiling, but he was very diplomatic to say the least. Really, so. But yeah, it's an absolute, it's a body blow for Brighton. There've been some strong words used, such as corruption and a big six fix, but not by Dunk, I should add, just from some of the fans. But I don't know about that. But I think it was just terrible refereeing on the field and in the VAR room at perhaps a level that we haven't quite seen before since VAR was introduced. But yeah, I think the best thing now is the only thing De Zerbi can use, perhaps, is just use that sort of sense of injustice to motivate them to get a Europa League spot, hopefully, and also beat Man United in the FA Cup semi-final at Wembley the following weekend. That's all they can do.
Well, last question about VAR, hopefully for this weekend until the end of the season. But in an interview with The Athletic, Brighton chief Paul Barber said the Premier League could benefit from hiring top overseas referees. He was citing the lack of VAR controversy at the World Cup in Qatar over the winter. What do you think of Paul Barber's idea, Frankie? Do you think that's a good idea or a non-starter?
I think it's a very good idea. I mean, and like I said, I don't want to criticise referees or even analyse referees because it's such a tough job. And these decisions are, they define football clubs' future, and they are, for millions and millions of pounds, these decisions are. But they have proven, since VAR has been introduced, that the Premier League is just not, the Premier League standard refereeing is not good at using it, or has not coped with using it. The decisions this weekend were another example of that. And I think if you look back if I personally look back since its introduction, if you look at the 2018 World Cup, VAR was used brilliantly then. If you look before the 2018 World Cup, when VAR was being used in the FA Cup and I believe League Cup as well, it was a disaster. I mean, obviously you got some teething issues with it first being introduced, but it was sort of laughed out of town when it was first being used in England. You then look at the use of the Champions League. I remember its use for the Man City Tottenham game in the 2018-2019 quarter-final tie. It was used excellently by referees then to allow for Llorente's goal to stand and Aguero's goal to not stand in a very important moment. It would have sent Manchester City through. You then look at its introduction into the Premier League. Again, you give it down to just its teething errors, but so many issues with lines being drawn and handball rules and referees not being sent to the monitors. And, when referees are sent to the monitors, there's almost no point because they're going to overturn the decision. We had issue after issue after issue. And then again, we've seen the Qatar World Cup just been another World Cup where it's used and another World Cup where it's been used successfully. So the only thing you can say is many people do criticise VAR, and I understand that, but we are moving in that direction, and it can be used correctly to make sure that decisions are, and that's what it's there for, so that the correct decision is made. But the Premier League has not up to that standard. So you can't look at VAR and say it's VAR's fault. You have to say, well, it's the standard of refereeing, and therefore you may have to look to moving to using foreign officials because you are getting what you are after when using VAR. I think the issue I feel with English referees is there seems to be a real issue with undermining the on-field referee and assistant referee. I think if we look at the Saturday game, we saw the linesman clearly point to where he believed Matoma had handballed it. So I feel that VAR was saying, well, he's clearly explained why he made that decision. Let's go with that decision. But as Stephen Warnock pointed out earlier this week on Sky Sports, he's pointed on his shirt line. Therefore, VAR should be there to say, look, I understand why you've made that decision, but unfortunately that decision is incorrect. You should give the goal. Again, with the Matoma penalty, we've seen the referee clearly, he made a very distinct sign of saying no penalty at all. I think it's called cutting the grass in refereeing terms. He's very adamant it wasn't a pen. And I feel Farr was saying, well, he's clearly shown he doesn't think it is a pen. He had a very good sighting of it. Therefore, we will not undermine him and go with a decision. But they've issued an apology afterwards. That, it seems they are trying to keep the respect of referees, which is a difficult thing in English football. I understand that. But in doing so, they're undermining the decision and costing teams points. So I can really see why, until better training is put in place, I'm not sure what needs to be done. Until then, the use of foreign referees from UEFA and FIFA may have to be the way forward.
I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit now, Ashley. But League Two, the division that Crawler in, doesn't utilise VAR. Would you like to see VAR utilised at that level of football, or have Football League clubs kind of dodged a bit of a bullet by not implementing that system?
I think that falls down to just the standard of referees. I think, I don't know, you can kind of, it's 50-50 whether you're going to get a good referee on a match day in League Two. And I think that there's been times when decisions have gone, they've got it spot on and the referees perform really well. But at the same time, you look back on highlights and you see a blatantly offside goal and you feel like you're back in 2014 and teams just getting awarded wins by essentially cheating. But I've always backed the principle of VAR. So yeah, I would like to see it because it's an improvement of the game. However, I wouldn't like to see it if the same standard is being used that's in the Premier League. So it's a tough one. But yeah, no, I'd still take it.
A very diplomatic answer. Well done, Ashley. You passed the test. As Darren said, Roberto De Zerbi was sent off on Saturday against Spurs. Him and Christian Stellini were at each other's throats seemingly throughout the course of the game, and it contributed to a feisty atmosphere, culminating in the pair being sent off after a melee involving both benches in the second half. As Darren also said, De Zerbi will not face a touchline ban, but Brighton have been charged for failing to ensure their technical area occupants conducted themselves in an orderly fashion. But it's not the first time De Zerbi has been sent off this season, has it, Frankie? He was sent off in February's defeat to Fulham. Fans love to see managers exhibiting passion, and Chelsea fans use that to beat Graham Potter with, that he didn't show that he cared. But is there a danger that De Zerbi may up with an unwanted reputation after his latest dismissal?
Well, the issue might lie in the fact that reputation might be costing decisions for Brighton on the field. I think there's an old adage about the fact that Manchester United back in their heyday used to get a lot of refereeing decisions because referees were intimidated by Alex Ferguson. Referees are human beings. They do listen to what is said in the media about them. Roberto De Zerbi came out after the Fulham game and said the standard of refereeing in England is very bad. Now, if someone tells you that you're very bad at your job, you're not going to particularly take a kind following in to him, no matter if you're being professional or not. So, there is a slight thing that if De Zerbi is very critical of referees and has been critical of referees throughout his managerial career. He's been sent off in Ukraine. He was sent off at Sassuolo. This is the character that he is. But it will not help him. It can't, being critical of referees can't be helping him, especially as we've said prior, the fact that he manages Brighton and they don't carry the same weight in the Premier League as the other teams, such as Tottenham or the rest of the big six that they may face, and those decisions may go against them because of that. If you actually look at the fact that the decisions that come from his red cards when he has not been in the dugout, they've scored 9 goals. So I'm sure he doesn't really mind from that standpoint. Obviously, he would much rather be in the dugout himself, but the team seems to still be performing. But I think he's not going to change, and nor should he change. As you say, fans love what they want to see from their managers. They want to see passion, they want to see a character, and they want to be someone that is like them, someone that is showing that they care about the team and their results. De Zerbi is that, and he has the same sort of model as all the other big managers, the Jurgen Klopps, the Pep Guardiolas, the Contes, the Mourinhos, the Tuchels. They are fighting for their decisions because they want to win so badly, and both players and fans take to that in abundance and love to see it. He probably needs to get a bit more cute, a bit more clever with it. He's still a very young manager, and as I say, he won't want to be getting hefty fines and bans week on week because it's important that he stays in the dugout for the team. So he will have to adapt to it, and I'm sure he will. He's learning about the Premier League and the media and all of those sort of things. But the most important part, and the reason why he does it, and this is why all top managers do it takes the pressure and the spotlight away from the players. If you are taking all the attention about referees and criticizing referees and talking about all these sort of things, you're not focusing on the players and the noise that surrounds clubs about from the media about the players. And that is why top managers do it. They take all the frack, they take all the attention. It allows their players to focus on their games, and that will help Brighton, especially if they're not hit poor form yet, but if they ever hit poor form under Zerbi, he'll be able to deal with that so they can just focus on themselves as players rather than any of the spotlight that comes from being a professional footballer. So it's a tactic that will continue to be used. I'm sure he'll learn to use it a bit better. But in regards to himself as a personality, as you said, Graham Potter was criticised for it. I'm sure Brighton fans were also very critical of Graham Potter for his style of management when he was at Brighton, being more reserved. It's more entertaining. It's what you want to see. And long may it continue, I would say.
In other news, it's also been confirmed that Brighton will take part in the new Premier League Summer Series in the United States this July. They've been invited alongside Aston Villa, Brentford, Chelsea, Fulham and Newcastle United. The Seagulls will play Chelsea in Philadelphia on July 22nd, Brentford in Atlanta on July 26th, and Newcastle in New Jersey on the 28th of July. It's the first time the Seagulls have taken part in an international pre-season tour like this. How much does this demonstrate Brighton's increased profile, Darren? And did you ever imagine a day where Brighton would be taking on Brentford in the United States?
Quite. It's it just goes to show the reach of the Premier League and how the profile of a club and a city can change by competing in it. Really, like you say, there's perhaps a time, maybe not long ago, where you'd struggle to sell tickets for a pre-season match between Brighton and Brentford to the fans of the club, if it's taking place just around the corner. But yeah, in July they'll play at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is a spectacular stadium in Atlanta. Has a capacity of 71,000, home to the NFL team Atlanta Falcons, and also Atlanta United, who play in the MLS. It's going to be a great occasion. That will be their second game. They play Chelsea in Philadelphia, another brilliant stadium, the Lincoln Field, and then they play against Newcastle as well at the in New Jersey at the Red Bull Arena. That's the New York Red Bulls home stadium, and it's just sort of minutes away from downtown Manhattan as well. So it's quite a trip and a real step up in terms of pre-season fixtures to days gone by, and a great week in prospect for Albion fans who can afford it or who fancy taking a trip to the East Coast. A real step up. Yeah.
Any news on whether any of us will be attending, Darren? Do you know?
Well, get your passport ready, Matt. We could be, that could be quite nice, couldn't it? Like a little trip
It would be.
New Jersey, and then a few beers in Manhattan maybe for the evening.
Perfect. Doesn't sound too bad, does it? But no, not thinking too far ahead, this week sees Brighton visit Chelsea in Frank Lampard's first game at Stamford Bridge as interim manager. The Blues have been underwhelming to say the least. They sit 11th in the table despite spending more than 600 million this season, and I think they're currently on a run of 4 games without a goal. How do you see this one going, Frankie? In times past, the trip to Stamford Bridge might have held a little bit of fear, but I think you'd probably be quite confident of Brighton getting a decent result this weekend.
It's the team you'd most want to play in the Premier League right now, I would say. I know Chelsea are still like I say, the prospect of playing Chelsea is still a big game, but if you look at the form, 3 wins in their last 20 games in the league, which is relegation form. They haven't scored a goal in their last 4 games. They've just recently changed their manager. It'll be their 4th head coach this season. There's no clear plan as to how they're playing, who's in the starting 11, and to what the future holds for going on past this season. So it's a club completely in disarray. I think obviously you have to hold on to the fact that they are playing at home. They will want to put in a good performance after what's been a disappointing week in the Champions League, and also last week away at Wolves, but they are still in the Champions League, and that game is on Wednesday night at home. So a good performance on Saturday could carry them through, and I'm sure that is what Frank Lampard will be telling the players. But they cannot score goals. That's been the issue all season, but it's really come into fruition in the last 4 games. As I just said, they haven't scored. So they play a team on Saturday that's complete polar opposite to them right now. A well-run, stable club with a manager that has got a clear idea, a clear first 11. It would seem, I have to say, it feels like De Zerbi really knows what his best team is nowadays, and is playing well. Obviously, the Tottenham game at the weekend was a disappointing result, but what Spurs have that Chelsea don't have is, above everything, is 2 world-class finishers, and those 2 world-class finishers won Spurs the game. Really, I mean, Brighton were the better side, but they had players that could score goals and did. Whereas Chelsea at the moment don't. They have some very exciting potential there, but there isn't a clear goal scorer, a proven clear goal scorer in that side. So, as much as it's really weird to say this going into a Brighton Chelsea game, but Brighton will be rubbing their hands at it. Obviously they'll be very respectful and aware of the opposition they're playing, but they couldn't wish for a better opponent to play this Saturday. They really couldn't.
Albion ladies as well. They've got their 4th new manager this season in Melissa Phillips, and they take on Man United this weekend in the Women's FA Cup semi-final. What issues does Melissa Phillips have to solve ahead of this weekend's cup clash at Brighton, and can Albion hope for a new manager bounce, Darren?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what they're hoping for. She seems, on the face of it, a very, very good appointment. She's an experienced manager. And as we were saying just before the pod, it's I think it's their 4th manager this season. Obviously, Hope Powell, then the disastrous. I can't even remember his name now.
Jen Shua, I think.
Jen
his name
Shua,
was.
Yeah, probably gone and quickly forgotten almost. But then Amy Merrick stepped in as well, who did very well. She's a very good coach, and has since announced this week that she'll be taking a role with the FA, helping with the under-19s, I believe, with the Lionesses, to try and feed through the next generation of talent. And no doubt she'll do a great job there. It's a blow for Brighton to lose, a coach of her ability, but a really good sort of role for her to do with the FA, an important one there. But yeah, Melissa Phillips, she's got a big job coming up. They're at Manchester United on Saturday for the semi-final of their FA Cup. And then they're still bottom of the WSL, so that will probably be that will be the priority. So it's Everton at the Broadfield Stadium on Wednesday. That's going to be a huge match for Melissa Phillips and for Brighton in general for their season. And then they're off to Liverpool the following weekend on Sunday the 23rd. So three really big games coming up for the women, and as you say. The new manager will be hoping for that bounce immediately. Yeah.
I know that it's an FA Cup semi-final, Frankie, but considering the position Brighton women are in the WSL, is this going to be and obviously they'll try and win it, but do they see it as a bit of a free hit in a way? Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's an interesting time to appoint a new manager. I have to say, I know the England under-19 role is very difficult for Merricks to turn down, I'm sure, but the appointment of a new manager going into a semi-final like this is probably not what you want. You probably want someone that knows the squad very well, so that you can give yourself the best opportunity to win. Because the WSL still, as it has been for the last couple of years, there are more teams fighting at the top of the league, but the golfing class between those top 4 teams and the rest of the list is very, very big, and has been proven this season. Obviously, in the last game, United did beat Brighton 4-0, but it's an opportunity for her, as you say, as a free. It's an opportunity for her to see her squad, see how they do under, what is a big spotlight, immense pressure. And it's, as you say, she can go into that game saying, this is an opportunity for you to impress me ahead is what is a crucial run-in of games to keep Brighton and WSL. We're bottom of the league. We can put the rest of this season, what has gone before us, behind us. This game is an opportunity for you to show me why you deserve to be starting for the last couple of games of the season, and to show us why you can keep us in the WSL, because even if we lose, we've got much bigger fish to fry in regards to keeping our WSL status, which is more important. Obviously, a cup victory would be great, but that WSL status for next year is what would keep Brighton progressing in the right direction. And if they win the semi-final, it's a game at Wembley, and that's a great opportunity to win some silverware. So, as you say, you can't read too much into it as a game because they are very, very much underdogs against a very, very well drilled United side. But yeah, you've got to twist it and make it the best situation for yourself, and that's what they've got to do.
Meanwhile, Ashley, Crawley are back in the League Two relegation places after drawing with playoff chasing Bradford and suffering quite a dispiriting defeat on the face of it at Barrow. Both these results are bettered by Hartlepool United, who have now leapfrogged the leads in the table and are out of the relegation zone. How would you sum up Crawley's week? Obviously not the best, but yes, it could. Well, yeah. Sorry, how would you sum it up?
Yeah, it's been an absolute disaster, really. I mean, when you compare it to where they were a couple of weeks ago, I think they were 5 points clear of the relegation zone. They were completely in the driving seat. Hartlepool had some big fixtures ahead of them. So did Colchester. Now it's just it's fallen off for Crawley, and it shows the the craziness of the League Two relegation battle at the moment. But no, it's just it hasn't been a good week at all. And I mean, the draw to Bradford, it wasn't too bad. Mark your side. They're pushing for the playoffs, and they're having a really strong season. And Barrow, when you look at Crawley's past results away from home against big sides, you kind of expect a 4-0 defeat. I'm not trying to, completely write Crawley off, but Barrow pushing for promotion, and it was just another sign of Crawley lacking that belief. They got a goal early on. The amount of times that Scott Lindsay has told me this season that when sides score early on against Crawley they just have no belief going into the dressing room at half time they can turn it around in the second half, or that's how he feels like anyway. So yeah, it's kind of just fallen off the rails quite unexpectedly, really, because it really did feel like Crawley were fine, and now they're straight back into things.
Well, Scott Lindsay made 5 changes to the side that drew with Bradford at Barrow, citing injury and fitness issues. He approached the Crawley fans at the end of the game at Barrow, explaining why he had to make so many changes. But if you were a Crawley supporter who made the not inconsiderable 654-mile round trip to Barrow, your heart must have sank a little when you saw that lineup. There's no disrespect to Crawley. The bench players don't nearly have the same level of quality as the first team players. Would you agree with that, Ashley, or am I being too harsh?
Way too harsh, actually, Matt. No, it's genuinely, yeah. No, your heart would have sank a little bit. At the same time, though, you've got to respect Scott Lindsay for going over to the fans. I don't think any of their other 4 managers that season would have done that, but actually, Darren Byford would have done it. I do believe, but no, it was quite considerate for him to go and do that, and it shows that he's backed up those statements that he said this season, that he really appreciates the fans at Crawley. But when you look at the lineup, I mean, Corey Adai in goal, that's the stable first choice at the moment in this season. Travis Johnson's played a couple of games, and so has Agungbo, the loanee from Arsenal. So that's not too much of a shock. But Agungbo at right centre back is a little bit worrying. Harry Ransom hasn't played too much this season, and neither has Brandon Mason in left back. So no, absolutely your heart would sink. A little bit about Brandon Mason as well. He was the player that Crawley at the start of the season, they got their fans to vote which position they wanted to sign, and it was Brandon Mason. They voted midfielder. Brandon Mason, I don't think he's featured in midfield once this season. He's been left back the whole time. But regardless, yeah, I mean, I think it's Carney Chukwuemekis hasn't played much at all. Rafiq Khalil kind of looked like he was in midfield, and Jack Rolls, as much as he's got potential, it would just be extremely disheartening looking at that Crawley side.
Well done on remembering Darren Byfield first and foremost, because I completely forgot about him. But does the current injury crisis, which saw the Reds shorn of the majority of their regular back four, as you said there, does that make the decision to loan out George Frankham and Tony Greig even more baffling in hindsight? Yeah,
it does. And I feel for Scott, because I don't think that decision came from him. It was kind of a Tom. It reminded me of the Tom Nichols scenario, because I'd asked Matthew Everington, where is Tom Nichols? And I'd ask Scott Lindsay, where is Tony Greig and George Frankham? And they'd look at me like, please don't ask me that. I don't know. It's kind of, but it was a question that had to be asked. But Tony Greig, he's doing great with Dorking. Frankham, he's a top player, and they're two leaders that Crawley could have absolutely needed in that game against Barrow. Because when you look at that defence, that's what really cries out at you. Players that are inexperienced, that are young, and that just can't really command the defence. They're hanging on with people like Joel Lynch. He's very experienced in the game, but apart from that, obviously Dion Conroy as well when he's fit. But yeah, they desperately needed those kind of players, and I really don't understand why they let them go. If you just thought about, you know, how Crawley were going to get on the rest of the season. They were in a relegation fight when they got rid of them. Just an absolutely crazy decision.
Well, Crawley have 2 home games this week to hopefully get their survival bid on track. They take on Tranmere Rovers on Saturday, and that is followed by a massive game against Colchester on Tuesday evening. Looking at it, the Reds have got quite a good home record under Lindsay. They're currently unbeaten in 5. Does this give supporters reason to be confident going into those 2 games, Ashley?
I think it has. And even without Colchester, because obviously you look at Tranmere and Colchester are the one that you think, you know, okay, Crawley can really do something here. They're in this relegation fight. They're at home, as you said, and they've performed well there. But also when you look at Tranmere, they played really well away against Tranmere early on in the season. I think that they could have snatched a 1-1 draw, and unfortunately Dom Telford missed the penalty. But absolutely, I think there's been countless, not even under Scott Lindsay as well. And I know this squad has changed a bunch since the start of the season, but at home, I think they've beaten Barrow, I think, at home. They've beaten Mansfield as well, Salford in Scott Lindsay's first game. And I think apart from the thrashing against Carlisle, yeah, they've done really well. So that is certainly an advantage. I mean, it's 3 of the next 5 of their last 5 games at home. And then the other away game against Hartlepool. So you would look at all those games and you'd say, ideally, you only drop points against Swindon Town away from home. So, you know, that gives them a real advantage. But you just never know. You just never know what's going to happen with Crawley this season.
And just how big is Tuesday's games against Colchester, Ashley? The U's are currently 4 points clear of Crawley, and a positive result for the Reds surely is a must going to next weekend's relegation 6 point, as you said, against Hartlepool United, who sit a place above Crawley.
Yeah, because ideally, you know, you beat Colchester and then they're dragged back into things. As at the moment, I mean, there's 4 points separating Crawley in 23rd and Colchester in 20th. You know, and unfortunately, at the moment, when you look at those 4 teams, Crawley have got the worst form. I mean, a couple of weeks ago they were flying, but you know, things have swapped over. It's so massive because it turns the fight not just between Hartlepool and Crawley. It brings Colchester and it brings Harrogate in a little bit closer, and that will be such a boost for those players because at the moment, you know, you're off the back of an absolute thrashing. You know, in the relegation zone, you've got to dig deep again, and that win would really turn things around, I think.
Quick word on Sussex cricket, Frankie. They got their county championship season off to a winning start against Durham. The win, which equalled last season's total number of county championship successes, was Sussex's first on the opening day of the domestic campaign since 2015. Can Sussex fans expect a few more wins this season off the back of that performance against Durham?
I think they can. I think we, you know, I spoke last week about the fact they were looking to push on this season and sort of change what the narrative. And I think, you know, it was an excellent start and it was an excellent advert for county cricket. It was a sellout on day 2. I turned up on day 2, which was Good Friday. And throughout the 4 days, I think we saw really good displays with both the bat and the ball. Farbrace spoke at the media day the week before the season started about sort of how games had to be sort of taken hour by hour and to not let them slip away but when from good positions or winning positions because in the last day or 2 they might have a poor session and then from that poor session another poor session follows and another poor hour and eventually they lose the game. And there was a number of occasions over those 4 days against Durham, which is a very strong County 2 division side, where they looked like they were falling into losing positions. On the first day, Durham raced to 200 to 1. There was a pretty poor bowling display from Sussex at the start of the game, but Nathan McAndrew on his Sussex County debut, the Australian fast bowler, bowled really well at the end of the day and at the start of day 2, and it restricted them to a total of 376. And at one point, it looked like they were going to breeze to a 400 plus score. Then, you know, Sussex came into bat, some soft dismissals at the top of the order. They found themselves 91 for 4 very quickly. And again, you're looking down the barrel of not making it past 200, but you know, they do have Chisteshwar Pujara, one of the best batsmen in the world, who showed his class and scored a brilliant 100. And he was really well supported by Carter as well, who had a really good game, both with the gloves and also with the bat. And that helped them to a 300 plus score. And then, as I say, you know, like say in both situations on day 1 and day 2, your backs are up against the wall. But by the end of day 2, they were still very much in the game and only, you know, less than 100 runs behind. And then I think we speak about when we look about the England international team, which has been the main focus of cricket over the last year, and about Bazball and how brilliantly attacking cricket is. And a lot has been spoken about the bat, but Farbrace was very, very keen to point out that obviously he wanted Sussex to play in that attacking positive style as well, but he was more focused on the bowling, and the bowling being aggressive and hunting for wickets as a pack, to restrict teams rather than looking at not conceding as many runs. And Sussex showed that brilliantly in the second innings. Sean Hunt, Henry Crocombe, Finn Hudson, Prentice all bowled exceptionally well, and then worked together as a unit and got Durham out for 189, and that set up the victory, which setting a total of 230 is a doable total, and that's all down to them and their aggressive hunting of the game and working as a bowling unit, which was Sussex haven't done in the last couple of years. And doing 230 was a target that they could achieve, but they had to start well. Haynes played well straight off the front, scored a 64, which was a good knock in under pressure. But yet again, Sussex found themselves in trouble. They lost 2 wickets in the space of a couple of overs twice. And all of a sudden they were 64 for runs away with only 5 wickets in hand. A very nerve-wracking total when you've got your tail end to come in. But Carter. But in those situations, we need, or as cricket fans, you need to see someone grab the game by the scruff of the necks and keep calm under pressure. That's what Carter did. He batted smartly, but batted sensibly, especially when bottom order batsmen were falling around him left, right and centre for soft dismissals. He kept his head. He played really, really well. Didn't try and be a hero and hit 6s and 4s. Just batted really smartly and took Sussex over the line. So we really showed this young team. We really saw them mature over these 4 days, and it's really, really exciting for the rest of the season because it was so important for them to win that game and sort of put their money where their mouth was with what they've been saying before this season. And it was an excellent game of cricket, an attacking game of cricket, great for a neutral, and a fantastic start for what could be a brilliant season for them.
Well, fingers crossed. They're at Yorkshire next week, I think. So we'll get all the reaction live on sussexworld.co.uk/sport, and no doubt we speak to this on the podcast. But finally, we will head over to Steve Bone's score prediction corner. Chelsea Brighton this week. Darren, what are you going for?
I just hope that the manner of the Tottenham defeat doesn't hang over Brighton too much. It's going to be a big one to come back from. But I think De Zerbi will get them really charged up. I think he will be able to get them motivated again, and so I'm going for a 2-0 Brighton.
Frankie, how do you see that one at Stamford Bridge going?
I would just like to point out before I do this that Steve Bone should probably be substituted in for me at this point, because I said that Brighton Brentford wouldn't be a high scoring affair. There were 6 goals, and then I said that Brighton would win 1-0 last weekend. I think like my Super 6 this season, I haven't got a single one correct. So don't listen to me at this point. I think it's probably just I should put myself on mute. But I again still strongly believe that Brighton are streaks ahead of Chelsea at the moment, and it couldn't be a better time to play. And so I'm going for a 2-0 Brighton win, but that's obviously not going to happen. So
nailed on Chelsea win.
Nailed on Chelsea.
This could be the first one.
This could be.
Ashley, how do you see that one going?
I'm going to go a 1-0 Brighton win. Absolutely.
And United ladies, as mentioned, against Brighton ladies in the FA Cup semis. Starting with you, Ashley, how do you see that one going?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think they're going to get thrashed. I saw Man United play Lewis in the last round, and they were great. And I don't see Brighton. That they've showed that they have the potential to get thrashed by Man United, and I think it's going to happen again. So I'll go 3-0 Manchester United, unfortunately.
Darren, any hope for Brighton?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Ashley on that one. United beat Brighton 4-0 a little while ago, and maybe it might be a bit closer, but I'll go 2-0 Man United, I think, for that one. Very, very hard to see Brighton getting something from them.
Oh, I know I'm definitely coming to the wrong man here to give a positive Brighton result, but Frankie, I'm hanging my hat on you. Give us some positivity going into that one.
Well, do you know what? I might as well go for a Brighton win, because it's obviously it's not going to be my prediction that comes to fruition. So I should probably go for the Manchester United. Yeah, Manchester United will win 3-0, and then obviously that will mean that Brighton will win. But I mean, I have to say, as Ashley alluded to, I've watched a lot of WSL this season, and Manchester United look really, really good, really, really good, and they will be gunning for a double here because they're top of the WSL league as well. So I would like to throw that in, but also you never know. Come on, Brighton, I guess would be be the man of that.
And Crawley Town home twice, Tranmere and Colchester. Frankie, how did you see Crawley getting on in those two?
Difficult games. The Easter weekend is normally a very vital weekend for how your season finishes. It can really set the tone, and obviously it couldn't have gone much worse for Crawley. Who is it they have on Tuesday? Sorry, is it Colchester?
They're at home to Colchester, who are...
They're at home to Colchester.
20th. Yeah, 4 points.
Yeah, I worry that the weekend could have had a massive effect on them. So I'm going to go for a Colchester win. I'm going to go for a 1-0 Colchester win. And then it's Tranmere on the Saturday, is it?
Is indeed, yes.
And that's away from home.
No, they're at home for that one.
They're at home again. I will probably... I'm not... Yeah, I don't feel this is going to go very well here. I'm going to go for a 2-1 defeat there as well. I'm not particularly confident of Crawley for the rest of the season, I'd say.
Darren, how would you see this one going? Those two games going, sorry. Does the home form, is that what you're going to kind of be confident?
I think so. That's the hope, isn't it? And I think they really need 4 points from these two matches, and I think they'll get them. I think they'll. I'll go for a draw against Tranmere, 1-1 against Tranmere, and then I think they'll get over the line against Colchester in midweek, 1-0, 2-1, something very close.
Ashley, two-part. How do you see those two games going? And do you think that if they get no points out of those games, Crawley's goose might be cooked in terms of their survival battle?
If they get no points, God, I didn't even contemplate it. But yeah, if they get no points, they're done. They're not in the Football League for next season. I think that's confirmed. But I do think, as much as the Easter weekend means a lot, they were on a run of 6 losses recently, and they turned it around and got 5 points clear of the relegation zone. So I think Scott Lindsay has it in himself to motivate this squad when they're in perhaps their darkest part of the season. So I'm going to say they're going to win both matches. I'm going to say a 2-0 Crawley against Tranmere and a 3-1 against Colchester.
Well, brilliant. Thank you very much for your time, chaps. Thank you very much for joining us this week, Ashley. As mentioned at the top of the podcast, you are part of the Football in Question podcast. And whereabouts can we find you?
Well, my @ is on screen. It's TFQ_podcast on Twitter. We're on YouTube. You just type in the Football in Question, Spotify, Instagram, TikTok. So, yeah, just have a look. These lads nailed down the Sussex content. But if you want a wider range view on football, then check us out.
Oh, flattery will get you far, Ashley, let me tell you. And don't forget, you can catch up with all the latest sports news covering everything we've talked about today at sussexworld.co.uk/sport. Take care, everyone. I'll speak to you all next week. And look after yourself.